Welcome to this incredible concert this afternoon. My name is Isaac Thompson. I'm the president and CEO of the Minnesota Orchestra, and also a longtime friend and student of both Georgia and Michael. I met Michael actually before Georgia when I was in high school writing a paper about programming music for symphony orchestras. And that experience of meeting Michael opened up an entire world of possibilities that today, as we hear this music, exemplifies their spirit and what they offered not only to the Twin Cities and our arts community, but I think to the music community as a whole. So just what a pleasure to be here with you all today and to help lead this interlude. One thing I was reflecting on with Michael and Georgia, I think two things that really stuck out with them was one, their intense belief in young people. I'm an example of that with Michael's connection in high school, but Yvette as a emerging composer, and this whole project which features composers at a stage in their career where they are emerging. And then the second thing is curiosity. Michael and Georgia were probably the most curious people I have ever met. And this fusion of poetry and music coming together just exemplifies that curiosity. But I want to start with Yvette and ask maybe a first question, and then eventually we're going to open it up to questions for anyone here on stage. But Yvette, I want to ask you about how you really lived with this poetry, how you kind of absorbed this, and how that ultimately was translated into music.
Yes, thank you for being here, first of all. So I needed 2 months to know what I wanted to do. I really wanted to learn about the poet, the text, really understand what the poem was saying. And I even had a conversation with Charlie, I think thank you. He was very graceful. And yes, it took me 2 months. And the first thing I did that I finally thought this is going to be the way to go was a graph, which is interesting because I cannot draw a thing. So but in the poem, what I saw was 2 levels, and the flower is being underground, and then coming through, and then that level above ground. And when the poet says the sun flickering, the noises above me, so that idea of below and above. And I thought musically I could use frequencies from low to high. And I could use timbre, double bass, and violin, and piano up here, and crotalis. So I wanted to, just illustrate what the poem was saying. Macro level going from low to high, underground to above ground. And micro level was every line, what was happening there. And I think just to finalize what I'm saying here is that there were 2 images very powerful at the opening of the poem, suffering and an open door. And I just felt that had to be there, that contrast between something really light and hopeful and something more inward and darker sound, maybe.
Wonderful. Susan, I want to ask you about, you mentioned in an email actually exchange that we had that this was a kind of a leader-esque poem. And I wonder if you could just talk about Louise Glick's work and this work in particular, what you meant by that.
Sure, thank you. This poem, The Wild Iris, is part of what we could almost think of as a song cycle. It leads off a set of poems that are almost liturgical in their structure. For example, many of the poems are called matins, which is a morning prayer, and many others are called vespers, which is an evening prayer. And if you think about the text that we just heard and the gorgeous music constructed for it, it's really about transformation in an important way. To think about that door that opens and this perennial plant that lives half of its life underground and then, like Persephone, emerges in spring. And of course, this is not something that's possible for us as mortals, and yet I think the voice of the narrator here, which is the flower, is asking us to think again about that. When I look around at this audience today, I think many of you may be grandparents, and you may have had the experience of a child looking at a picture that was taken years ago and saying, where was I in that picture? And it's such a profound question. And I think this poem invites us not only to ask, where was I, but where will I be when that door opens again? The other voices in the cycle include a God who is often very stern, and the poet herself, I think we should say, and the flowers, who have distinct personalities, but the wild iris with that beautiful azure that was so evocatively played for us is the opening voice.
Wonderful. We're going to deploy the mic here very shortly, but I want to ask Yvette just about the instrumentation, which is so interesting, and how you kind of settled on this ensemble.
Yes. Well, the double bass we have is a rock star. Everybody is. They play so well. So I knew I had to use cello and violin. That was part of the commission. And piano is my instrument, and I'm so grateful because Tony asked me a few times, are you going to use the piano? And I was like, no. Then again, are you going to use the piano? Because, I mean, he knew that we were going to have these amazing pianists here, too. And I'm so glad. Thank you for that. But I think the instrumentation and the English horn is such a special instrument. It's such a beautiful sound. And I think we don't have enough music for it. And it was a good opportunity to write for it. And yeah, I think violin and the percussion was also, for me, I was thinking about high frequencies, low frequencies. And that's how the instrumentation came to be, thinking about the deep, deep sound, the double bass, although I asked her to play really high at the end, and she can do that amazingly well. And I was really nervous. She helped me by making it happen. Yes, I don't know if I answered the question correctly, but that's what I was thinking.
Excellent. So we want to open this up, I think, to some questions from all of you. Mari has a mic, so if there are questions maybe on this side, Mari will find you, but raise your hand and feel free to ask anyone on stage anything you want about the piece or about the process, and I'll be over here. Yes.
This was just gorgeous. And Stephen Yoakum, your voice was perfect for this. I was struck throughout how well words generate color. And I was wondering not only what our panelists think about that, but also the musicians.
Who wants to take that?
We do actually pay attention to the text, even though we're, airhead musicians. For instance, there was one moment where Yvette wrote a tremolo, short notes were playing very fast bows, where the violin and cello traded back and forth. And as we looked at the text, it's about, darting in bushes and changes of light. And so Yvette didn't write. Tell us, you didn't write everything in there, and it just says tremolo on a note, and there's about 100 ways to do that. And so as we looked at it and saw the text, we thought, well, this has got to be like little accents, and they need to dovetail together, so it's like, little birds in the bushes going back and forth. And so we take it very seriously, and there's all kinds of, darkness and light in this poem, and of course, your writing depicts that, and we just go for it.
I also love the abrupt and then the very sudden. That was very, very striking. Other questions from the audience?
Thank you, Yvette and musicians. This is just utterly stunning, and I can't wait to hear it again. I was struck, Yvette, you adhered so closely to the rhythms of the poem, but you made a very bold decision to break between ending and abruptly. And how did you come to that moment? And it was brave. Thank you.
Yes, so the violin cadenza that comes after ending, well, let's go back a little bit. So they're pretending to be playing when it says, being a soul and unable to speak. And then ending the violin cadenza, that's my homage to Georgia, because this was her instrument. So I was nervous about the length of that moment, because ending abruptly is one line, but I thought this homage is more important, and I really hope that the connection between ending and abruptly could still be clear, yet delayed because of this moment of violin solo.
Another question right here.
Thank you so much. Could you talk a little bit about the rehearsal process, the ensemble rehearsal, and did you always have Stephen reading with you as you rehearsed, and how much time did you spend on it, and did you break down into smaller groups, et cetera?
Well, so we got all of the materials, when did we get it? A couple months ago, right? For me, what's really helpful, because you can see the score with all of our parts in it, often composers include a MIDI, which is just like a computer. It's like really heinous sounding, but it shows you exactly how all of the notes align. Tony despises the MIDI. I love the MIDI. Because it's really helpful just to kind of get it into your bones a little bit. But really, so much of the work, I think maybe the most amount of work when it comes to analyzing the poem, learning your part, seeing how the part fits, happens before we meet, even for the first time. So I think we all put in quite a bit of time into our score study and our individual parts before we met. And then once we meet, it's kind of amazing to do a commission, because it's like something that's alive, but you don't know how exactly it's alive yet until you really hear it in person for the first time. So things really, if a piece is alive like this, the piece kind of tells you what it wants, So we were able to just kind of find that out together. Stephen was there from the first rehearsal, and then we had 2 or 3 rehearsals, and then Yvette heard it for the first time.
I want to add one more thing to this. So you're talking about the MIDI file. So I do embrace it as well, because you get a chance to hear, sort of. But I kind of liken it to AI in a way, as we can look at our parts and we can listen to a MIDI file that's very electronic and it's very precise. But then we worked with Yvette, and we added some breathing and some longer notes and some things, some human element to it that makes it completely different than that MIDI file and that electronic AI kind of feeling thing. So that's where the human part of this comes in. And of course, then you have a poem with words that also brings that in. So you hear it breathe and grow and go away. And so there's a depth to it that we get when we work with a composer as well, and when we work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, the same is true for me. I thank them, because the music exists first in my imagination and with my piano. And then the computer, which is, I don't like it at all, because it's so square, so prescriptive, software. But then I come here, and I do believe firmly they are the experts. I don't play their instruments. And so I always learn from them, and that human element goes both ways, where they're teaching me, and we are adjusting things for the music to be alive and exist, become what it is.
And that's so integral to who Georgia was too, her connection with composers and that work together. So it's wonderful to keep that going.
I think we have a question back here.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for playing and sharing and writing. This is wonderful. Question partially about the composition project. This might be a funding question for a project of this scale as well, but on a poem that you've mentioned sort of functions as a leader or something that could fall into a larger song cycle. I think we see poems set in collections sometimes and a few different musical pieces written. That I think that could apply to the Wild Iris as a book, not just a singular poem we hear today. What's that decision look like to write music for one poem rather than a song cycle?
I could answer just a little bit of this question. It's very important for us to have the permission to use the poem, and it's a very specific permission that's granted. It's a one permission. It's for this particular performance, so we'd have to go back. If we were the commissioners, the Steinberg Fleisanis Fund, we would need to go back to the Wiley Agency in New York and HarperCollins and regain additional permissions, if that helps.
I think Susan did want to read actually the final poem just before we hear the piece again from this collection, just to kind of maybe put some of the poetry into context. So we'll hear that in a minute, but I know that there was another question over here. And
Well, really, this is one of the brightest, pingiest instruments, and it's just at that moment the absolute vulnerability in the strings sliding down in their harmony matches this effect that she discovered. I don't know how you discovered it. It's not a usual one, but it's a beautiful one, and so it's just a treat to kind of have a soloistic, unique, celestial type effect in that moment. Yeah, it's a great moment.
you mentioned that you found it someplace?
Well, it's a book that it's called How to Write for Percussion, and yeah. And it's a wonderful book, and they have videos that go along with the text, and the author is showing different effects, and so the earth bending, so the bending sound, and there was another one they gave, which was to put the crotalis on the timpani head and then lower the pedals. Right. So, but I didn't want to have timpani and grand. So the water was the alternative. But I learned about it by studying. Yeah, I didn't come up with it.
It would be like a New York Times cooking app, but for percussion. Any other questions from the audience for the performers or for Yvette or for Susan? Excellent. So before we hear the piece, right here.
I've been at all of these premieres, and I think today represents the most spiritual for Georgia. It represents the music and the poetry and the reading and the musicians and the music. And for me, this is one of the best. Thank you.
And what a privilege to be able to have the opportunity to hear the piece a second time, which is so exciting and just really wonderful. But before we do that, Susan, you wanted to read just a quick poem from the collection to kind of cap this all off.
Thank you. This is the poem that completes the cycle that began with the poem that we're hearing today in this gorgeous performance. Louise believed deeply, I think, in reimagining the cycle of life, and much of what she invites us to think about is voice as resurrection. and this poem is entitled The White Lilies. As a man and woman make a garden between them like a bed of stars, here they linger in the summer evening, and the evening turns cold with their terror. It could all end. It is capable of devastation. All can be lost. Through scented air, the narrow columns uselessly rising, and beyond, a churning sea of poppies. Hush, beloved, it doesn't matter to me how many summers I lived to return. This one summer, we have entered eternity. I felt your two hands bury me to release its splendor.
So thank you so much, Yvette. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, performers. Let's hear the work again. Thank you so much.